Okay, everyone, I think has had the opportunity to read the bio in the program regarding our next presenter, Wade Gilbert. Wade is presently, he's in California. He works down at the university down there. If we could just get everyone's attention, we can get going here. That's like everyone's attention. Thanks, guys. Just moving right along. I guess Wade's bio is in the program that we've identified there, and you can see the lengthy list of involvements, athletic involvements he's been involved in, certainly in high performance. He's probably written one of the best books that I've read in regards to coaching. I know I talked to him a couple of times over the last couple of years and tried to get him to come up here in 2019, but unfortunately he was not available. I think he was off in Europe and then going off for preparation for the Japanese Olympics that didn't happen. But I stayed in touch and recycled back to him this past spring, and would love to have him in person, but I indicated to him he'd probably have to make 3 bus stops here to get to Winnipeg, and it probably wouldn't be worth his while. So one of the benefits, if there are any, of COVID is that we now have the ability to stream people in, and we've been taking advantage of that over the last few years. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce Wade Gilbert. He's originally from Ottawa, but he's been living down in the States for over 20 years, I believe. And he's going to talk about coaching and go through a workshop there. So without any delay, I'd like to introduce Wade Gilbert.
Thank you, Peter. Really honored to have the opportunity to speak with the group. Definitely would have loved to have been there. I've been in Winnipeg a few times. In fact, one of the first hockey tournaments I ever played in was, I must have been 10 years old, I guess, 10 or 11. So oddly enough, I've always been a Winnipeg Jets fan. So I wish I could be there in person, but we'll do the best we can this way. And what we're going to do today is, normally I would like to do more interactive things and activate some of the things we're going to talk about. But given the format we have here today, I'm going to share a lot of information with you, both some common principles, but also real practices, real examples of things you could start doing right away, or maybe you're already doing. So I'm going to get going here. I work in California State University in Fresno, which is right in the middle of California, pretty much close to Yosemite National Park, if you've ever been down here. And I just want to introduce the background for what I'm going to share with you, give you a bit better perspective on where this information is coming from. So yeah, born in Toronto, raised in Ottawa, grew up playing hockey, outdoor rink stuff, really always kind of in my blood. And then from there, I was always really curious. I wasn't good enough to make it at a high level after 16, 17, I guess. And then, but I always was really curious about coaching. For some reason, I just, had good coaches, bad coaches. Like we all have had a range of coaches in our experiences. And my sense is that, there's not people out there deliberately trying to make it a bad experience for kids, but they maybe don't know. They're doing the best they can, right? So I really went on this path of trying to figure out the science and the practice of good coaching. What do we know about good coaching, and how can we help coaches get better? And that's allowed me to write books and edit journals and work with groups all over the world. And it actually took me from Ottawa to Los Angeles, where I worked at UCLA, and I happened to cross paths with arguably the best coach ever, a guy named John Wooden. He was voted coach of the 20th century. Lots of books written about him, and he's written a lot of books. And he lived to 99, and I got to have a relationship with him and learn from him and people who played for him. Unfortunately, we have no video of him in practice sessions, so we had to rely on what he shared with us in his writings and what people wrote about him. And then from there, as I kind of put my ideas out more and more, I had lots of opportunities, very fortunate to work with a lot of different hockey groups. I coach hockey, little kids, peewees and bantams, U10s, U12s, U14s, have been world championships, NHL coaches, junior coaches, wrote the coach development framework for the IIHF. So just really lucky to be around a lot of really great people in hockey, and what a great community with hockey for sure. But then it's also allowed me to go outside of hockey. So a lot of the things I'm going to share with you today are not from hockey, but you're going to see the relevance here, because when you get out of your lane or you get out of your sport, and these are just some of the different groups I've worked with in the last few years, um, you start to see patterns, right? And it's not a hockey thing or a soccer thing or a golf thing. You start to see what great coaches do across, regardless of the sport, right? And then we can adapt those things and make it hockey specific, but we can learn a lot from watching great coaches in other sports. And culminating in the last few years, as Peter alluded to, working with Softball Canada and going to the Olympics in Japan. I originally was hired to work with the coach, and then the coaches, and then the team. And then we ended up, it was 2021, we went over there and made history and won a medal. They had never won a medal before. And so that was a good experience. Also, again, trying to put these things into practice, right? So we talk a lot about best practices, but I really want you to think about best principles, because it's not about copying what somebody else does. We go out and watch another practice, or we hear something or read something. Um, it's not about taking it and putting it into our team or our practice. It's great coaches look broadly, try and learn as much as they can, but then they try and understand why that might work with that team or that coach or that group of athletes. Because if you understand the principle, then you can create your own best practices. So it's not about copying what other people are doing. It's about watching and learning and asking questions and then making it your own, adapting it to your team, your context, your culture, your athletes, your philosophy, right? So to set this up, this is, I mean, we could end the presentation right here, honestly. So I've done a lot of research, over 30 years of research and practice all over the world on this. And I read this article a while ago. The coach of the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball team here, they had just won the World Series, and they had a very first-time coach, Dave Robertson. And when he was hired, the first thing he did was he went across sports, and he kind of went on a little tour, a study tour. And he went out and he asked coaches, other great coaches, pro coaches, what should I know? I'm getting into this thing called coaching. What should I know? What have you learned that can help me? And he said, I summarized everything I learned from that tour into these three things. And basically, and this applies whether you're coaching 5-year-olds or coaching an NHL team. Players want to know three things about their coach. Number one, does the coach care about me? That's fundamental. There has to be some connection there. Does the coach care about me? Number two, can I trust them? That's fundamental, because you might have great knowledge, great wisdom, great experience, but if people don't trust you, none of that really matters. So they have to trust you. You have to build trust. And then three, can they make me better? And that's the essence of coaching, building connections, developing trust, and helping them get better. I mean, honestly, we could end the session right here. That is, I love the way he summarized that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to frame what I'm going to share with you around helping athletes get better. Okay. And there's something that we call the 4 C's, and some of you may have seen this before. It's actually research that we developed out of Canada, and this is our targets as coaches. So what are we trying to achieve as coaches? Yes, we want to win. Everybody wants to win. I get it. So I don't even talk about winning, because we all want to win. But what can we control, and what are our targets as a coach? And we call them the 4 C's. We want to build competence, confidence, connection, and character. These are the 4 C's that underpin quality coaching frameworks around the world now. And so I really, really encourage you as a coach to think about, and we're going to go through each one. I'm going to show you real examples and from different sports. So how great coaches build competence, confidence, connection, and character in their athletes. The competence, better hockey player, right? Physical skills, technical, tactical skills. Confidence is resilience, right? Tougher athletes, mental toughness, physical toughness, resilience. come back when they lose, they come back when they hurt. Um, Connection, that's better teammate, right? Someone who can get along with other, with also communicate with officials, communicate with administrators. So being able interpersonal skills, right? And then character is, we think of, you know, morals and integrity and values and things like that. So it's a really simple framework to help us as coaches kind of stay on track. Am I building competence, confidence, connection, and character? Am I being deliberate about it? Right? Not just designing a bunch of drills and running practices. Are there elements, if I spend a week with you, you know, would I see elements of you deliberately trying to integrate and teach competence, confidence, connection, and character? You don't have to use those words with the kids, but I use it with parents all the time to help create the language that we want to reiterate. So we'll go through each one. I'll show you a few examples and some real strategies. So we'll start with competence. And the more I've studied and been around great coaches, the essence of coaching is teaching. We're teachers. And this is just a quote from a guy named Ron Adams, who assistant coach for the Golden State Warriors in the NBA. And he actually coached here at Fresno State, and I've had chances to work with him a little bit and interact with him. And he's an example of a great teacher. And in fact, the root of the word coach is teaching. Coaches are teachers. Great coaches think like teachers. So when a kid doesn't understand something, the default isn't punish them or yell at them, it's teach them. If they can't do it, I probably haven't taught it well enough. Think like a teacher. Now, for sure, sometimes kids are going to be off task and, you know, have lose focus and stuff like that. But generally, the default should be, I need to teach it better. So I want you to just take 30 seconds. This will just be a minute max here, a little pause. If we were together, I would have brought a bunch of balls and we would have played around with this a little bit. But maybe the person next to you or at your table or however you're configured there, what is the first step in teaching someone how to juggle? So very basic skill. And I could teach you how to juggle in 10 minutes, I guarantee you, when you understand teaching and learning. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Just have a little chat. What's the first step in teaching someone to juggle? All right, I'm going to pause you there. So again, if we were in class or workshop, we'd be playing this because it really shows our gaps as coaches in understanding teaching and learning. And if you said, you probably said things like how you hold the ball, or we'll toss one ball first, or maybe two balls, or I'll give it a demonstration. Wrong, 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 all wrong. So the first, we have to understand the principles of teaching and learning. And so when I was asked to write this book a few years ago, I wanted to make sure I had a whole chapter on teaching and learning in sport. What do we know about how learning happens? Because great coaches are great teachers. So the first, I was able to kind of distill it into four principles, athlete learning principles. And the first one is what they already know or think they know can help or hurt learning. So the first step in teaching someone anything, we use juggling as an example, is finding out what they already know, what they can already do. So the first step in teaching someone how to juggle is ask them, do you know what juggling is? Have you ever seen juggling? Can you juggle? Can you show me? Because then it's a diagnosis, right? I now I know where to start teaching. If I'm saying, no, step one is how they hold the ball. Well, I didn't even ask them. Maybe they already can juggle, and I'm teaching them how to hold a ball. So think about, I know it's difficult with teams and you wouldn't necessarily do this all the time, but there should be some kind of assessment preseason, and then maybe periodically when you're introducing a new tactic or technique, who can do this, or who's seen this before, or who knows it, maybe they can demonstrate. That'll give you an idea of where to start teaching. The second one is the motivation. Athlete motivation directly influences learning. So we can't assume that just because I designed a great drill and I'm the coach and I'm telling them to do it, they're going to want to do it. And motivation directly influences their commitment and their effort. So it's important to think about why would they want to do this? So maybe it's taken an extra couple of seconds to explain, this is why we're doing this drill, or this is how this relates to what we did last week. Or there could be incentives, or things like that. But understanding, not just assuming I tell them to do it, they're going to want to do it. They might do it, but they don't necessarily want to do it, so they're not fully invested. The third one is, to get really good at something, you have to understand and learn the component pieces, the parts of the skill. So think of a puzzle. Every skill is like a puzzle. Skating, passing, shooting, angling, whatever it might be. There's a bunch of other little pieces to that they have to have, right? So, for example, we might complain after a game, man, the passing was terrible. The kid's terrible in passing. But could be a lot of reasons why passing, it might not be that they can't pass. They're in the wrong position, or they're looking at the wrong things, right? Their view is in the wrong place. It could be a million things. That could be anxious, so they get rid of the puck too quickly. So it's not that they can't pass, but it's all the pieces that go into being able to execute a good pass in a game, right? So we have to understand the pieces that influence what we're really trying to teach. And then the last one here is this idea of deliberate practice and feedback. And I'm going to explain a few things and show you some examples on this fourth point. You may have heard of deliberate practice before, but it's really important concept for how we design practices. And that's really where great coaches make their mark, is in training, right? In practices. And there's so much misunderstanding, misconceptions about feedback. So I'm just going to show you a couple examples. So deliberate practice, the idea with deliberate practice is that as you get better, it gets harder. And that's really counterintuitive for a lot of kids in particular. They expect as they get better, it should get easier. But in fact, if you want to be really good, it's always going to be hard. Because once you master something or get to a certain level, we have to stretch it. So you never really arrive, right? So it's always going to be hard if you want to be great, you really want to be good at something. And that's kind of an eye opener for kids, because they just figure at some point they get it. And now I got it, right? You've arrived. And so it's really important to help them understand that it's always going to be hard. And in fact, it's going to get harder, even as you get better. So we want the performance to be automatic, not the training. And so that's why deliberate practice is different from regular practice, kind of running a practice, going through the motions, doing the stuff we always do. And there's a place for that. But there has to be elements in your practice where it's really messy, because they can't do it yet, or they haven't mastered it. So you'll have access to these slides. So if you want to go back to things. But this is a really great resource on this idea of deliberate practice. And it wasn't in sport, but it evolved into sport. And a lot of coaches, this is a really classic book in understanding teaching and learning and coaching and expertise. So what is deliberate practice? It's the kind of practice that demands full concentration and what we call mental images. So they have to be able to see it. So to be able to master something or get really good at something, you constantly have to be able to see what it should look like. So that's where it's important to have demonstrations, video, images. It's really, really critical for kids to watch hockey. I'm shocked when I coach hockey, at least down here in California, how many kids never watch hockey. That is critical if you want to get really good. You have to watch. That should be part of the part of their weekly practice. Homework. You have to watch hockey, because that's really critical for learning. Requires really maximal effort, so physical and mental effort. There's going to be a real specific goal, so it's not just we're going to do this drill for 10 minutes and see where we end up. Like, there's a specific goal in terms of time or passes or shots or whatever it might be, or accuracy. There's a long-term improvement. So it's not about today. And that's why, there's a lot of discussion around the world in hockey, and no different than other sports in terms of, why do we have state or provincial or national championships at U8 or U10 or it's who cares? Who cares who wins at 10, honestly, right? Look at Finland. Like, it's about making sure we have a lot of people playing hockey at a high level, and we're competitive at U18, U20, in the pros, things like that. And then often this kind of practice is not the fun practice, because the fun practice is practicing stuff you're already good at. So if you didn't show up as a coach and the kids had the ice, they're going to practice stuff they already can do because it's fun. We're no different. You go to a driving range and you get a bucket of balls, you're going to hit your favorite club most of the time because it's fun. It feels good, but you're not getting any better. So the hard practice usually is not all that fun, but the best athletes really do enjoy this kind of practice. I'll show you a quick example of what, how this might look. I was asked to come out and spring training with a Major League Baseball team. And this little drill they were doing was a good example of deliberate practice. In fact, their player development director read that book and said, "Hey, can you come out and see how we're doing on this?" And so this was a fielding drill. And instead of just rolling a ball to the player and they field it and toss it back to the coach or in a bucket, they have to field it. And as it's rolling towards them, the coach is yelling a number 1 to 9. And it might be hard to see on the screen, but on that screen where there's a couple of buckets, there's a net, and it has not a grid. It has 9 spots. So the ball's coming at them. Just before they catch it, the coach will yell 4, and they got to throw it to the 4 spot, right? So this requires concentration, focus, effort. It's messy. They're going to miss a lot, but it gets out of rote practice, right? So it builds, it keeps pushing them and stretching them. But deliberate practice is critical for development. But if you only did deliberate practice, you're going to lose a lot of kids, because think about it. If you're only doing stuff they're not good at and you keep raising the bar and it's always hard and mentally and physically demanding, that's exhausting, right? So even at the highest levels. So you need to balance deliberate practice with what we call free play. So there needs to be elements, and we all, I'm in my 50s, if you're my age, you know this, but we used to do a lot of outdoor rink hockey, right? And street hockey and things like that. And in every sport, we've kind of removed the free play. So kids are trained. They train more than ever. But where do they get the counterbalance to the training, where they can be creative and not get yelled at if they make a mistake and take chances and figure things out on their own? So, that integrating that free play into your training program is really, really critical. And that could be 5 minutes at the beginning or end of a practice where they kind of have the ice, free time. They can shoot, pass, do it at play, scrimmage, whatever they want. Kind of uncoached, right? Could be supervised, but uncoached. Really, really important. Okay, feedback. So we switched to feedback. And you may have seen this before, this idea of a feedback sandwich. And I've even seen images in coaching books, positive, negative, positive. There's no research on that at all. It's somehow got into the popular, mindset, and it's intuitively, it makes sense. Tell somebody something good, then tell them something bad, then tell them something good. There's no research on that at all. So I would encourage you to ditch the sandwich if you're using it. Instead, when we look at the science of feedback, one of the keys to giving feedback is making sure they're going to receive the feedback. So you might have great feedback, but the kids aren't paying attention. They're looking somewhere else. Their head's down. We've all been there. So the first step in giving good feedback is making sure they're ready to receive the feedback. And this is just a little acronym that some coaches use, the HERE principle: head up, eyes front, attend fully, remain silent. So you don't have to keep lecturing them. Use little cues, mantras, things like that, like here, let's go, come on, here. So that they have to be ready to receive what you're going to share with them. So what is good feedback? This is an example from USA football that we use. And I love it because it's very simple to remember. If you think pull and push, so forget positive and negative, throw that out. Think pull and push. And the formal terms, if you went into the research, is task intrinsic and augmented. But just think pull and push. So feedback can be what we call pull feedback. So I'm going to pull the feedback out of the athlete. That's intrinsic to them. They know if they missed the shot, if they didn't hit the time mark, if they were off in the activity. So there's a lot of things they already know that we don't have to tell them. They know, but we can ask them. So let's pull the feedback. How'd that feel? What'd you see? What do you think happened there, right? And that's a bit of a continuum, because the other end of the continuum is what we call push feedback. And that's where I'm going to augment what they already see and feel and know. So I'm going to push feedback onto them. I'm going to tell you, this is what happened. This is what I saw. This is what we need to change. So which one's better? It depends. They're both really important. There might be practices where you want them to take ownership and it's going to be messy. And you say, you know what, today's a pull, tell your staff, today's a pull practice. Today's just asking them, or maybe even this drill. Ask, what do you feel? What do you think? What do you think? But you can't use pull feedback if they don't know what they don't know. So when they're learning something for the first time, asking, what'd you see or what'd you feel? They don't know. They don't know anything about it. That's when you got to push. But as they learn a little bit about it, then you can pull more. So forget positive, negative, think pull, push. We're going to finish on competence here in a moment. The last part, I just really quickly want to share with you what we know about a good practice. And really, the image of you have here is a guy, is a legendary kids baseball coach out here. But when you look across great coaches and the research, really good practices have these four things. Every drill or activity has purpose. So it's intentional. It's not, well, we always do that, so that's why we threw it in there. No. What is the reason for having that activity in there? Variety. So keep drills brief. So it's not about, we're doing this till you get it right. No. Plan it out, 8 minutes, 7 minutes, maybe max, especially depending on the age of the kids. And they won't master it. They won't get it. And that's why you have repetition and progression. So we're going to do that drill multiple times in multiple practices. And then you move on to something else. That keeps them engaged. And you're learning as you're taking notes and watching what's happening, right? Competition. Again, if we didn't show up to practice, the kids wouldn't get in lines and run drills. They would make teams and play a game. So integrate competition into your drills as much as possible. And then game speed, especially in a sport like hockey, right? As much as possible, can we have it close or near to the conditions that they'd have to execute it in a game? So in the book, I'm not going to go through all this, but in the book, I have a checklist, a one-page checklist that coaches can use as a bit of a way to kind of check on how they're doing in their practice design. Say, where am I including some of these things, as best I can. It's always something that we strive for. It's not necessarily something that you achieve, but okay. So I know I'm going fast, but again, you'll have the slides and we'll have a few minutes for questions if you want here. The second C, so competence, confidence, connection, character, is confidence. So how do we help build confidence in our athletes? And the main thing to remember here is that the number one source of confidence is competence. So no amount of me telling you, that's why that feedback sandwich is baloney. It's a baloney sandwich. No amount of me telling you you're great and you can do it and you'll get there is going to help you get there. Me teaching you how to do it is going to get you there. And all the research that you look at, self-efficacy and self-confidence and belief, and the most direct way to increasing confidence and belief is teach them how to do it. Because when you get confident in something, you feel good about it and you're more willing to take chances and kind of put yourself out there. So teacher, right? So what kind of environment do we want to create that's really conducive to teaching, which will elevate confidence? One of my favorite examples here is this guy with his arms stretched out. His name's Karch Karai. He's was voted best volleyball player of all time, won everything you could imagine. And he's our US women's coach here. And this is a picture that was taken after the World Championships in Italy a few years ago. And this was the first World Championships gold medal that the Team USA had ever won in women's volleyball. So always really, really good, but had never won the championship in the history of the sport. And this guy comes in, first time coaching at the World Championships. He'd only been hired a year or two ago before this picture, and he did something the program had never done before. So just by chance, about a week after this picture, we're sitting in a class together. I'm giving a workshop, and here's this guy, Karch Karai. And so of course we had to, what did you do? What changed? And he said, well, and then this is a picture here of some of our Olympic coaches, different sports in this workshop. He said, one of the things, the first thing I did when I got hired, somebody recommended I read this book. And some of you may have seen this book or come across it. It's called Mindset. You may have heard of the term growth mindset. It's not a sport, again, not a sport book or written by somebody in sport, but really influential in thinking about the type of environments we want to create for our athletes and in our teams. And then I have his part of his coaching philosophy he wrote down here, and I just circled job one, growth mindset. He said, and you see here, mistakes, ... ugly. So he said it was really clear to me when I took over the team that great athletes, world-class athletes, but they were afraid to make mistakes. So if you came to our gym and watched a practice, you'd see what you would expect to see of great athletes, really clean, looking sharp, like, wow, they're great. They're a great team. So, but nobody's getting better. And because people are afraid to make mistakes, because you make a mistake, you get yelled at, you get benched, you get embarrassed, whatever it might be. So who's going to want to take a chance and try something they don't know how to do, right? So he said I had to change the mindset in the gym from one of what they compare fixed and growth mindsets. Much of our training environments are centered around this idea of a fixed mindset. So your whole focus is on proving your ability. And even think what we do with kids, right? When we rank kids, we have selection camps, tournaments, all these things, which there's a place for that. But from a very young age, kids are kind of trained in that environment to prove their ability, to prove how good they are, as opposed to focusing on improving what they can do, which builds a growth mindset. So as a coach, you control the kind of environment that you have with your team. And really what you want to do is have a growth mindset type of environment where the focus is on improving. So I'll show you how he did this. He said, in the past, when you made mistakes, you got punished or yelled at, right? But now you're going to get punished or yelled at if you're not making mistakes in training, right? To a point. So the idea is that's the training ugly part. So training's going to look ugly because we're working on things we can't do yet or can't do well yet. And you're not going to get punished for making mistakes. Now, at some point, you have to move on, but it's a subtle but really, really important mindset shift that encourages people to try things, right? And continue to be a learner. And they ended up winning the Olympics in Tokyo, other world championships. And if you look at this website, if you want to go deeper, this Becoming a Learner, there's a little video of Karch Karai explaining what he did in the gym, and how, some strategies he uses there. So I encourage you to think about, and again, if we were in a workshop, we'd pause here and have some discussion, but I encourage you to think about how do you react when kids make mistakes? Even in a game, right? Because ultimately the games are practices too when we're working with kids. So how do I respond when they make mistakes? How do my assistant coaches respond when somebody makes a mistake? How do other athletes on the team respond to each other when mistakes are made? If it's always kind of punishment or negative in a sense, then why would a kid ever take chances or put themselves out there? And that develops a fixed mindset. I am something versus trying, I'm becoming something. So I'm not, it's not, I am fast or short or strong or tall. I'm becoming fast or strong or, good at defense or whatever it might be. The other part about building confidence is, I want to share one other example here with you, but this happened to me when I was coaching kids soccer. Right before the first game, goalie comes right up to me right before we started the game. So, coach, I'm nervous. And I'm sure you've had that. Maybe kids don't verbalize it, but you can tell and you can see it, right? So, what do you do in those moments, and how do you help kids feel more confident going into a game and to perform? And one of the simplest ways to make sure that you're putting them in a position to do what they've been trained to do is creating a pre-competition checklist. And I really strongly encourage you to think, you create a lesson plan or a game plan maybe, or we have game sheets. There's always things we have that we got to bring with us. But what about a little pre-competition checklist that you share with your team and your staff and maybe even parents, right? Because before a game, something always happens. Some kid forgot equipment, or there's an issue at the rink, or a referee. There's always something, and then you get pulled over somewhere else. So, to give your kids the best chance to perform, we need some kind of routine that keeps them focused. Because a big part of feeling anxious before a performance is partly because you don't feel ready. So, I can control if you feel ready, and a routine and a checklist will help you do that. I'll just give you a moment to look at this. This is one that I created when I was coaching, I think, U12 Pee Wee kids. And not say, again, it's the principle, not the practice. I'm not saying this is what it should look like. This is what worked for us. But getting them reinforcing, the game starts before the game. So, the game actually starts when we do dry land. It's game on. We're in the game, right? So all these things help us feel ready and prepared. So this was, a guide, and we practiced this, right? And then we put them in place so that the kids will feel they still could be nervous and they still might play terrible, but I'm doing what I can do as a coach to help them feel prepared, right? And then we had some stuff at the bottom there when you're in the game. So you have to be in the game to win the game. And so on ice or off ice, if you're on the bench or on the ice, you're still competing, you're still performing. So these are important cues and reminders. So just an example, but the principle is having some kind of pre-competition checklist and practicing it, and putting in that goes a long way to building confidence in my ability to perform and be ready. And then also I put, there's a lot more that can go into a pre-competition checklist, as I'm sure you've experimented with the night before, sleep routines, nutrition, meals, all this kind of stuff, post-game stuff. So I do have a more extensive version of that I've kind of put together, but I just wanted to get you to start to think about, how might that fit with what I already do, or what I could start to maybe play with a little bit with my team. All right, move into connection. So with connection, this is really about the interpersonal skills and being able to communicate with each other and with other people. And this to me is really critical. You could say this is maybe the foundation of everything we do, because this statement, we coach people first, sports second, has been reinforced to me with the best coaches in the world. So you might be surprised. The people who win the most don't focus on winning. They focus on building people and good teams and good environments. And so this idea of we coach people first, sports second, you're not a hockey coach. You're a people coach, and the people you're coaching happen to play hockey. So, it's an important kind of mind shift. And great companies are the same, like Toyota, was number one company in the world for a long time. They don't view themselves as a car company. They're a people company. They build people who at the moment happen to build cars. Who knows what they're going to build in 40 years? So these are just two examples I put up here of legendary coaches. Our World Cup soccer coach, only coach ever to win 2 World Cups in soccer. And then our water polo coach, they've won, I think, the last 4 world championships and 3 Olympics. But they coach people. They focus on building connection and coaching people. So I'm going to show 4 little activities that I really like, I've used, and I've shared with people all over the world that seems to resonate with a lot of coaches. Things that you can do, very simple things that you can do to build connection, both with between you and your athletes, but also between your athletes. So one is called the one word activity. And this is actually, there's a book that I took this from called The One Word. And again, it's not a sport book or a coaching book, but you can adapt these things because it's about people. And you can use this in lots of different variations. But one way to use it is have your kids. I wouldn't do that. Well, you could do this at a team meeting, right? The preseason, you could do it anytime, really. But this is one thing that we did with this is just an example of a high school basketball team, but asking the kids to write down on a sheet of paper the one word that best describes them. So this is something they did at their first team meeting, and they could color it and have fun with it. And then they had to share their word and then describe it to, they went around the team. My word is silly, or my word is goofy, or whatever, serious, right? And why that word. So that starts, it's fun, it's silly, it's not intimidating. And then you see in this picture, a perfect example, every kid's smiling. They're building that connection. You could also use this as a team activity. So what's the one word that we're going to use to define our team this year? What's the one word we're going to use to define the kind of experience we want to have as a team this year? I just did that with a college team. So looking back, whether we win or lose, how do we want to be? Like, what kind of experience do we want to have, right? They came up with enjoyment. We want to enjoy the game. Okay, well, let's live that, right? Second activity here, I wish my coach knew. I use this all the time in my classes. In fact, someone shared this with me. It was something that was featured in the New York Times in an education article. And I was in a taxi in another country and said, hey, you should take a look at this. And I started to use it, and it's really powerful. And you could look this up. There's examples of this online too. But periodically, giving your kids a space to share with you one thing they wish you knew about them. And you can do this throughout the season because, things happen in their lives throughout the season that impact their ability to focus and be present and things going on. You see an example here from a 10-year-old kid. I wish my teacher knew that my dad works 2 jobs and I don't see him much. Because we make all these assumptions, right? We look in practice or in the locker room, that kid's lazy, that kid's disengaged, that kid's hyper. And we make all these assumptions, but we don't know why. And there's a lot going on in these kids' lives that if we just asked would really help us build some connection and better understanding of why they behave the way they behave. And you'll be shocked at some of the things kids write down. It's better if you can let them write it. So you could have cue cards and, they just write something down. They leave it in a box or a helmet, right? Just throw it in the helmet on their way after practice or something. So it really gives you a chance to, and some will be silly and kind of surface level, but some will be really deep. And that's an opening for you to have a conversation with that kid or learn a little bit more and share some of your experience, right? You build some connection there. A third one I'll share with you is player profile cards. And this one I actually got from John Wooden. So he shared that, and then I've used it in hockey when I've coached hockey too. He coached 40 years, and every kid he coached, he kept, it's almost like remember when you used to go to the doctor's office and they'd have your file? It's like a one pager that he just filed on every kid. And obviously there's a lot of different ways you could do that now, but it got me thinking about, doing that and why that would be important. And one of the things that he wrote, like he would write things down, how many siblings they have, if they have a nickname, favorite player, favorite team, but also things like responds best when, doesn't respond well when, And then one of the most interesting things I thought he had on there was reminds me of. And he did that because, especially you're coaching, over time, over years, inevitably you start to see this. There's similar types of personalities, right? And we all do that intuitively anyways. Like, man, that kid Joey reminds me. Remember that kid we had 3 years ago? Adam? Oh man, he reminds me exactly of Adam. You could pull out Adam's file and see what works best with Adam, and chances are that's probably going to work well with Joey. So it kind of fast tracks your ability to make connections and meet people where they are. And so this is just an example of one I did with a hockey team here, um, Monsters, the Fresno Monsters. So I had they could take this home and do it with their parents, depending on the age of the kids, right? So favorite position, favorite hockey team, favorite player. And again, down here, I was shocked. Like a lot of kids don't watch hockey, so they don't have a favorite player or a favorite team. And that's an opportunity for us to say, hey, you should be watching hockey, or maybe assign it as homework, little videos. And then one thing we should know about your player, if it's for the parent, that will help us coach them better. And then this is all on one page. You see the 4 C's. So I put the 4 C's in hockey language, starting to help teach that language, both to players and parents. And I don't care what the number is on here. I ask them to self-rate. I don't put this in a spreadsheet and I'm not tracking this. The number is irrelevant. It's about teaching the language, reinforcing the language, getting them to think about confidence, connection, and character, and what a complete hockey player looks like, right? And then a few things at the bottom. What do you want to get better at? Right? So it gives them a bit of ownership, a bit of autonomy. But again, principle, not practice. Make it your own if you do something like this. And then the last one here is a team club trust account. And what I've found unequivocally, teams that have higher trust perform better than teams that don't. Doesn't matter the sport, the level, the country, the culture. Trust directly impacts performance. So it's worth investing in and trying to, build. And one of the examples I saw that I really liked was this idea of a trust account, a bank account, right? So you explain to your team, your kids, trust matters. The higher our trust account, the better position we're going to be in to perform well. And it's also going to be a more enjoyable experience. So I've even seen coaches have like a jar or a piggy bank that they keep and show sometimes right to the kids, and do activities where you reinforce, could be trust marbles or coins or rocks or whatever. And you have times maybe in the locker room or on a bus or wherever, you talk to the kids and you bring out the jar and say, okay, Sarah last week, she was really positive and one of her teammates put a couple of pebbles in the jar. Okay, our trust account went up. So and so, when these two guys got in a fight in the locker room, that was a withdrawal. And you take stuff, some pebbles out of the jar. So you're constantly reinforcing and showing them the visual of our account. And so this is an activity I often do with teams, with the athletes. Once you explain that concept, you tell us, what are deposits, what are withdrawals? And this is way more powerful than me going in and lecturing and giving them a list. Being late is a withdrawal. Leaving a dirty locker room, that's a withdrawal. You can do that too, but see what they come up with, especially kids. It's amazing. They come up with some really neat stuff that we wouldn't have ever thought about, and then they own it. And then when they don't do it, you can be, more direct with them. Say, hey, you said this. You guys agreed on this. It's not happening. Bunch of withdrawals, right? All right, the last one here that we're going to look at is character. And with character, this is really the team culture. And that's one of the things I get asked about the most around the world is team culture. How do you build team culture? Everybody wants to talk about team culture. So to me, the character is the culture. And the essence of team culture and character is what you do, not what you say. And there's lots of variations of this statement. This is just an example from Nick Saban, a really successful college football coach here in the U.S. What he likes to repeat, what you do speaks louder or so loud that I can't even hear what you say. And it's the idea that the character is in the actions, not what you say you're going to do or what you aspire to do or your version of something. It's what you do. Okay. And you see that a way to teach that is through how you teach your values and your standards. And you definitely should make time with your team to teach values and standards. And that should be integrated into, I'll show you some examples here. Some people refer to it as, what matters to us and how we act around here. And when I worked with the ski and snowboard team, they just said, yeah, it's how we roll, right? It's how we roll. So it's more important to teach standards and values than to have a bunch of rules. It's easy to have a bunch of rules with punishments, right? But you don't get into coaching to babysit, right? So there needs to be consequences for sure for actions, but the more you can teach them about how we're going to roll, how we're going to act, then it becomes more normal, right? And so you have to have these standards that we can hold each other accountable to, and it's how we act. And one of the best examples I've seen, and some of you World Cup is on right now, the Rugby World Cup's on right now, and New Zealand just yesterday beat they beat Italy 96-17. They almost scored 100 points. One of the best teams of all time in any sport is the New Zealand rugby team, the All Blacks. And there's been some research on them. There's a nice book written about their team culture and how they do that, called Legacy. It's a fun book if you haven't read yet. You might want to check that one out. But I've been really lucky to work with them a little bit, and I've been to New Zealand multiple times, and I've been able to see it in action. What does it look like? And one of their mantras is better people make better All Blacks. So let's start there. Better people make better All Blacks. So again, you see that idea of you coach people first, sports second. So they invest a lot of time in the character building with their programs. In fact, they have a coach whose job is just that. And some of their values, they have a list of values, but some of the key ones for them are, you see here, humility. So you have to be vulnerable. And this is important when you work with kids, right? Because kids think they know everything. They roll their eyes at us when we're trying to explain things to them, or they have their head down because they know everything. So teaching humility is really important. Being vulnerable, collective accountability. So they don't have rules, but they have lots of expectations, and then we hold each other accountable, and that's really important regardless of the age group. Who can hold each other accountable? Coaches, parents, administrators, teammates, alumni, boosters. I mean, it's the whole club, right? And then trust. They have this statement, in the belly, not the back. So they're belly stabbers, not backstabbers. You have something to say or feel about a teammate, you tell the teammate. You don't go and talk to somebody else about them. And that's really important with teams, great teams. They face things, head on. We're going to work through it together, and in the face, in the belly, not the back. And if we were together, I'd show some videos of this, but you could look it up online. To me, this embodies character and values and expectations. Ultimately, you are the values. So this is way more powerful than a set of rules and punishments and being a babysitter and a disciplinarian. You are the values. This is a picture of the guy grabbing the bag, the older guy. At the time, he was the head coach of the All Blacks and won 2 World Cups coaching them. This is a scene you would see at every hotel around the world when they travel, airports, bus stations, train stations. The players take the luggage and they make a chain. They make a human chain from the hotel to the bus or wherever it might be. And they pass all the bags, all the gear gets loaded up into the gear truck. And the first or last person in the line is the head coach loading the gear. And then just think about that for a moment. Think of an NHL team. Do you see the coach loading gear into buses? Maybe I haven't seen it, but that's an equipment manager's job. That's somebody else's job. So what's the message? That's somebody else's job. No, if this is about if humility is one of our core values, grab a bag and load the bus. What do we often do too? Oh, rookies do that, right? How's that a value? What is that accomplishing? That's just dehumanizing somebody and making them do it. And anyways, there can be a place for that. I get it, but you have to be the model, and you have to show them what it looks like. And that brings me to this idea of character is caught more than it's taught. And it's not about having a bunch of rules and lecturing and punishing and making kids skate and all this kind of stuff. It's about creating an infectious environment. And I this really hit me when I was in Australia a few years back, and I visited about 25 different teams over 3 weeks. So it's team, 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 team. So you're seeing all these different environments, and some are world class and win all the time, and others are always at the bottom of the rankings. They all have beautiful facilities and lots of resources and great players, but you could see the difference in how they acted. And this really struck, and this was before COVID. I actually wrote a little article about this, spread your team culture like a virus. And I actually studied how viruses are transmitted. Now we all know, right? But you want to infect people with the character. And that's way more powerful than trying to lecture them or, punish them. And so you create contagious environments. And so if you want someone to get the virus, right, let's say, or the flu, I could tell you about the flu, and if you don't get the flu, you're going to skate and all the, or I could sneeze on you, and I could sneeze on your gloves, and I could sneeze on the door handle, and I create, an infectious environment, and you're going to get the flu. And after I shared this one time, somebody sent me this. They said, "Oh man, I have a great example. This was when Larry Robinson was coaching with the Blues, and you know who Larry Robinson is, but when I do this around the world, people don't know who he is. I give a little context. He's one of the greatest players ever. He's won everything. And outside the locker room, here's this guy loading sticks into a stick bag. I think this guy doesn't need to be doing this, but he does. He understands that if we want humility and we want to work for each other, and whatever our values are, I have to be the values. It has to be contagious. So we have to make sure that they see it to learn it. And just to finish up here on this spreading this culture and how we roll and behaviors. When I did an event at the World Cup of Hockey, a player shared with me that he said, one of the things, I understand how it has to be contagious and it has to be the behaviors. So you create routines. You look for those moments, those repeating moments, how you enter a rink, how you enter a locker room, how you leave a locker room, how you take the ice, how you start a practice, how you end a practice. Those are all moments that occur over and over and over and over and over again. So you can create some routines that shape how we're going to roll in those moments. And that teaches the character and the values. And so he was sharing when he played with the Rangers, he said, we had a rule, when you enter the locker room, there's two things you have to do. Number one, you can't walk into the locker room with bad energy or bad emotions. Go walk around the building or do something don't bring that into the locker room. So you got to come in with good energy. Second thing, when you come into the locker room, first thing you do in the locker room is go and say hi to all your teammates. And think what often happens. I've seen it, over and over, all levels, but youth hockey in particular. Kid comes in, drops their bag, sits beside their best friend, starts talking to their buddy, and there's 14 other kids in the room, right? Put your bag down, go say hi, fist pump, whatever, every other kid in the room. that's how we roll. That's part of our character, right? And I had another example here. There's lots of variations of this with NFL teams, Seattle Seahawks. You know, before they leave their locker room to go out to the practice facility, they have it painted above the door, "I'm in," and they all have to slap it and touch it. You know, "I'm in." So when I walk through that door, I'm in. I'm part of, you know, I'm committing to what we're going to be doing today. So they're tapping in. And I've evolved this into lots of different environments. One time I was coaching, I think these were 9 and 10-year-old baseball kids. Um, and they don't understand values and standards and all blacks and, you know, all these pro sport examples. So I just put it in language for 9-year-old baseball kids. And I did do's and don'ts. So these are our values and our standards. Do this, don't do that. And guess what? We're going to be watching that, and we're going to be that's going to impact you know, the types of things you get to do. And if you've ever coached kids baseball, you probably have a smile on your face because you've lived this, you've seen this in action. And what I ended up doing to reward it, so we model it, we teach it, but I wanted to reward it so they would care. After every game, I bought packs of baseball cards, and I after every game, if they did these, you know, clean up the dugout, run out to center field, and I would allow the kid who best exemplified our dues to put his hand in the bag and grab a pack of baseball cards. Sometimes it was no kid, sometimes it was 3 kids, right? But they understand, and they love that. We could have lost 10-0, and they're cleaning up the dugout, all excited to run out to the field, see who gets, and then they open the cards together, and who'd you get? And so you're teaching behaviors, right? So it's the actions and the routines. And to build on that, I want you to remember this statement. You know, people do what you inspect, not what you expect. So that's where with the baseball cards, that's a bit of a way to inspect it. I'm gonna measure it. So it's not a hope. And you know, these are the things I expect to see from you guys. And then when it doesn't happen, I get frustrated. I start yelling and make you skate, do other things, or take or bench you. That's a hope. So inspect it. People do what you inspect, not what you expect. So measure it. Keep a record. Keep notes during practices and games of catch kids doing the character behaviors and not, right? Reward it, make it normal. This was an example from a guy, his name's Anson Dorrance. He was sharing this with me, and he's won 21 NCAA championships, soccer coach at North Carolina. And he took this idea from a guy named Dean Smith when he was coaching Michael Jordan at the same university. He saw him doing it with the basketball team, and he said, "I'm going to try this with my soccer team," and went on to win 21 national championships. And this all kind of comes around at the end. This is where we finish right here. So at the end of your season, if you're implementing all these things and trying to build the 4 C's, I should see the 4 C's and the character in your end of season banquet. And all teams do some variation of this, but it's pretty typical. We give out awards for best player, best offense, best defense, top scorer, you know, whatever. It's pretty standard. The things you reward at the end of a season, maybe that, but it also should definitely reinforce your values and your character. And so this one was one of my favorites. I did a session at Michigan State one time, and they had the all-time winningest coach in college hockey for a while. I don't know if he still is, but I was walking around their rink, and I saw their trophy case, and they had all these awards in there. And right beside, you know, top rookie, best defense, best offense, top scorer, all these things, they had this award. It looked exactly the same as all the others, called the Goofus Award. And I took a picture, and I said, "What the heck is this thing?" And they explained to me that one of their values is it's really important to be a good teammate and bring good energy to the team and have fun. We're trying to win championships. This is really hard, but it should be fun. You should enjoy hockey. So they have an award for the player who best helps us live that way and do that. And I thought,
Beautiful. People do what you inspect, not what you expect, right? And you have probably seen examples of this in other sports. Maybe you do things like this. I've seen teams give out a nails award. They have a little plaque with a big spike on it, or a nail. The kid who's tough as nails. A glue award. The kid who's the glue of our team. It's actually a stick of glue on a little board. So having fun with it, to reinforce your values. And who's at the banquet? Parents, alumni, sometimes media, administrators, right? Sometimes, right? So this might be the only one time all season where you really get to infect people around your club and your organization with your values and your character. And this is my own son. I'll finish this with this one here. When he was being coached by another coach when he was playing baseball, at the end of the season, the coach gave every kid a baseball, a brand new ball, called them up, and it wasn't a participation award. It was a meaningful award. He wrote on each ball a nickname for the kid that exemplified something they brought to the team. And my son was known as the Iceman because didn't matter what the score or when he was up to plate. He's just kind of a calm kid. So we finished there, and I encourage you to think about when you're teaching. I know it's challenging because it's busy and you get, into the season, but just kind of keep in mind, how am I doing in building confidence, connection, and character? And how am I infusing some simple behaviors, routines, rituals into my environment, into my team that will help us build these 4 C's? So thank you for being patient. I know I put a lot of information out there, but we'll end there. And Peter, I don't know if there's an opportunity for questions, or I'm willing to hang out if there's a bit of time.
Well, thanks very much, Wade. There's a lot of information there. I've always believed that the coach is probably the most important volunteer within our organization, not to undermine any of the administrators that get involved in the sport. But if we have a good coach and he can provide a positive experience for our members, there's a good chance that individual is going to come back and continue to participate in the sport. So I think it's great that we provided some super direction to a lot of our members on things that they need to look at in a coach that can assist them maybe in hiring the right coach or pushing them in the right direction. But Wade indicated that he's available for some questions now, so we have a few more minutes here. If you'd like to ask questions, I think he's identified certainly on the book that you saw on the screen, and again, that's probably one of the best books that I've ever read in regards to coaching. From start to finish, and it pretty well covers everything that you wanted to know about coaching. That's not only good for just sports, but it's also good for whatever environment you're in, because we're always working in an environment where we are coaching, whether that's a staff that you might be working with or your kids that you might be working, etc. So I would think that if there's any general questions or specific questions you might have in regards to coaching, whatever it might be, look what you're looking for in a coach, if you're looking to hire coaches, or what are some of the benefits, etc. I urge you right now to bring that question forward. And don't be intimidated by asking that question, whether you think it's a good question or a bad question, because there's probably someone else in the room thinking the exact same thing. So your question would benefit everyone in the room. So any questions?
Test. Thanks. Peter, I know maybe most of us are dealing with minor hockey, and in that way, parents are a big part of this. So my question for Dr. Gilbert would be about how we include parents in the culture conversation throughout the year, and how would you suggest we include parents in this throughout the season for best results?
That's unusual because I've never had an issue with parents. Yeah, right. But we're all parents, right? So, simple way to think about it is over communicate to under assume. Over communicate to under assume. And I've been around a lot of coaches in youth hockey who take the approach like, I don't deal with parents. Well, guess what? You're going to deal with parents. So that's not an option. Blowing them off, so that's the team manager's job. I don't talk to parents. No, that's a mistake. Parents are bringing their kids to you, and they're
super invested in their kids. That's awesome. They should be. They love their kids. They want what's best for their kids. So in my experience, and what I'd recommend is to engage often with parents. So get them involved, have roles for them. Usually every team will have some parent, I don't want to stereotype, but it's often a mom who just loves organizing stuff and let's go, bring her on. And having team, some form of team communication, whatever that might be, whether it's a Facebook page or Slack or, text, or you don't have to manage that. Delegate that. Get people engaged, give people jobs. People love to be in, and there'll be some parents who don't just, I drop my kid off, show up, I don't want to, okay, that's fine. But there's going to be a lot of people who want to be engaged. So step one, engage, give them jobs, get them involved. And I know in some cases they'll have to do safe sport and different things like that, but there's a lot of stuff people can do that's really, they can help you without having to go through trainings and things like that. And then that communicate, most of the issues that come up, I see it, is lack of communication. Because parents are watching a game or they're watching a practice and they're like, why is he doing that? Or why is that kid doing this? Or why is that kid not playing? Or why did he start that guy? Or so I know, again, sometimes I don't have time for that. Make time for that. So I've even seen coaches, and I've helped coaches do this. You have a weekly coaching report. It's like Coach's Corner. And maybe beginning of the week and end of the week, or maybe once a week on Sundays, you type up a little coach's report and have it sent out. Here's what we're going to be working on this week, and here's what I'm thinking, and here's where it would really help us if you could remind your kids about this, or here's a nutrition tip, don't forget. So because we have it up here and we're reading stuff and we're talking to coaches and we know all this, and then we get upset when someone questions us. How dare they question us? They don't know. And the way they question sometimes, for sure, can be frustrating. So over communicate to under assume, have regular forms of communication, make the time for that. It's not about getting consensus. So that's, a preseason meeting with parents, helping them. You can be directive. This isn't, a true democracy. I'm coaching and there's certain ways we're going to do things, but I do want your input on these other things, and there's roles for us to play. And to me, when you do that and have that, it can't be, a lot of coaches will do the preseason parent meeting, right? It's either mandated or they got to do it. They go through team rules and schedule and what tournaments we're going to play and budgets, and great. And that's it. It's got to be regular communication throughout the entire season, weekly, not once in a while, because then the only communication is when someone's upset, they don't understand something, they got a problem, and that's not healthy for anybody. So just make that regular communication a really key part of it.
Excellent response. Any more questions?
So from a grassroots perspective, which I think lots of us are involved in, what would be one thing you want to see every U7, every U9 group implement with their teams?
I would say, I'm just reflecting when you say one thing, right? I would say I should see your values and the character in your practices. So if I just came out and watched a practice, I should see evidence of the values that you're trying to teach and the character you're trying to teach, and the 4 C's, right? So how you take the ice, how you start a practice, how you end a practice, how they leave the locker room, how they leave the rink, how they enter the rink, all these things, right? I should see some little behaviors and routines and rituals, and make it your own, right? Have fun with it, make it your own. But those are important moments. There's a neat book called The Power of Moments, And there's a lot of research on, what sticks and where there's certain moments that are really ripe for teaching, where you have people's attention. So I would definitely want to see that in that environment. I would want to see, I know you said one thing, but I would want to see um, lots of kids engaged, right? And engagement. I know Hockey Canada and USA Hockey, we talk about in small area games, don't have kids standing around, don't have a bunch of lines. But one thing I think in a practice, there should be an element of the practice that the kids own. That could be the warm up, that could be the cool down, that could be, a drill of the day or whatever it is. But even at 7, like giving kids an opportunity, supervised and with some structure where they can play. I know ice is expensive, but 5 minutes, where they get to play and not be coached necessarily. I think that's really important for kids because we don't, unfortunately, a lot of kids just don't play outside of practice. Maybe it's a little different in certain communities, but those would be important. And ideally, a third one thing, have cross age play. There's a ton of research, and that's what we used to get when we had outdoor rink hockey, right? Show up at the outdoor rink, and you got 10-year-olds playing with 6-year-olds and 14-year-olds. And so the cross age play within a club, could you have a practice? I know there's safety issues and you got to supervise these things, but could you have a practice once a month where it's cross age? The U7s, the U9s, U11s, whatever it might be, are practicing together. It's not a scrimmage. I mean, you could do that too within reason, but they're practicing together. And maybe you already do some of that. We've had to do some of that here because we have so little ice. We have one rink for, a region of 3 million people, one sheet of ice. So we have to have shared practices a lot of times. And it's part of the practice, we'll mix them all up together. And then part of the practice, you get that end, we get this end. But when you have cross age play, the little kids are trying to emulate the older kids. So they're learning. And the older kids get to really fine tune their skills because they can often dominate the little kids. And you build these relationships and partners. And plus, it's really good for building that club environment.
Excellent. We got time for one more question. Oh, down here in the corner.
On house league teams, especially at the U9, U11, U13 level, when a coach comes to them and says, okay, we're going to play to win. So in other words, you may not see the last 10 minutes of the game. Like that's a common, I'm an administrator. That's a common complaint to us. And it's very hard to handle because like right away we'll say, oh, what coach? Oh yeah, that guy, and we just wonder like, are we picking the wrong coaches? Are we not getting the right message out to kids? Like what's a right answer to little Timmy and little Susie about that?
Great question. I've lived that. I've seen it in all different sports. And again, it's part of the onboarding or the training with the coaches and the club. So we talk about team culture, the club culture. And that's where it's really critical that the coaches understand this is long-term athlete development. Nobody cares who wins the House League U7. You care. And it's not to devalue, people get into these dichotomies. Oh, well, you're soft and, life's competitive and they got to learn to win early. We're all striving to win. You should compete to win and you should care about winning, but not at the expense of losing a kid. You win a game and lose a kid. What did you win? Nothing. So as an administrator and as a club, you have to help the coaches understand you're not being evaluated on your wins and losses. I don't care how many games you win. And that has to come from the top down because coaches, again, I get, especially young coaches, young kids, oftentimes, parents, we think we're being judged on our win-loss record. Ego, I don't want to be embarrassed.
you know, and what's the first thing we ask people after a game? You bump into somebody in the parking lot or at work or a kid. Hey, I heard you played on Saturday. Did you win? So it's changing the culture. What other questions could we ask? Hey, you know, how'd you play? What was your favorite part of the game? And so it starts from the top down, and you have to help the coaches understand that you're not being evaluated on your win-loss record. And every kid is gonna, your job, what you're gonna be evaluated on is the 4 C's: competence, confidence, connection, and character. And you could create some assessments, you know, simple assessments around that. And every club, I think, should have a pre-assessment and a post-assessment. Your first practice should be skills assessment. Last practice should be skills assessment. Pre-test, post-test. Did the kids get any better? Because your win-loss record doesn't indicate they got any better. I got a big kid on my team who's fast and is going to score a bunch of goals and win a bunch of games. I'm a great coach? No. So, and who knows, even that pro level, the emotion, you get it, the kid's a different kid every time they show up, emotions and mood. And so you have to help them understand, and you create the language. Language is culture. So the words you use change the way people act and think. When you go to a new country, the first thing you try and do is learn some language, right? Language is culture. So you create the language, the 4 C's: long-term athlete development, coach people first, sports second, you know, create, and that has to be how you speak to each other and how you speak to people. And then the other thing to keep in mind is, you know, that old saying, what gets measured matters. So what are we measuring in our club? What do we post on our website? If it's just league standings and points, that's what we're saying matters. So what else could we show that matters? Maybe player of the week, or some leagues and some clubs, right, have a point system for the games. You know, if you get a certain number of penalties, you lose points, right? So it's not 2 points for a win. There's 10 points on the table, and depending on all these other things that happen, that determines who wins the game. So the environment will dictate the behavior. And there's no way, I mean, we could have a good, healthy debate about this, you know, even AA, AAA, you know, Pee Wee Midget or U14, you know, what's the level where it's appropriate to say, okay, last 10 minutes, just running through the best kids on the team because we've got to win this game. But definitely never, ever at House League would I expect to see that. You could argue if you have playoffs, you know, tournament, and it's, you know, to get into a certain spot so that you can extend the playing time for the kids. Like if we need to win this game, that's going to buy us another game, so everybody's going to get to play more. Maybe the last few minutes we're going to shorten the bench, so that's going to extend, because that's still developmental, right? If we get another game, everybody gets more opportunities to play. So this, and that's part of understanding your role on a team. Those are important lessons to teach people. But just a regular season House League game? No way. No way.
Thanks very much for that, Wade. Sorry, that's it for questions. Final wrap up there. So once again, we would really appreciate the opportunity for you to dial in from down in California. There's no need for you to tell us what you're going to be doing later on today, whether you're surfing or going down to the beach or taking in the sunshine while we're stuck up here in Winnipeg. But it's awesome presentation. I really appreciate it. And again, I recommend that anyone has not read the book to take advantage of that. So again, it's one of the best books I've read in regarding to coaches. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day, especially due to the time change that you had to get up a little bit early. You know, on the right hand, left hand side of the country. So appreciate that. And again. Is an opportunity to help to educate our members, to provide them with some of the tools and direction and guidance to ensure that we can provide a better opportunity for the youth in our province. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, everyone, and great questions, and enjoy your season. You know, again, think about the experience. What kind of experience do you want to have, and you want your kids to have, and focus on that, and keep the kids in the game.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.